it was, to people who didn't know what they were looking at, it was aggressive, very intimidating, out of control and chaotic. This is the Canine Justice Chronicles, the podcast which gives big love to our big breeds. I'm your host, Ruth Holroyd.
And I'm also your host, Peter O'Brien.
This episode focuses on Kobi, a gorgeous Dutch herder who spent far too long in a kennel. Kobi came to us after being found in a locked car in the car park of a Crown Court, as his owner had been sent to prison that day.
So the Dutch herder, originally bred as a herding dog, similar to the German Shepherd, the Belgian Malinois, super intelligent, super powerful, super beautiful.
Crazy drive.
Yeah, as mentioned, which is kind of why they've evolved and become companions in humans' lives with the military, the police, super physical jobs that require a whole raft of expertise to be able to fulfill, which is why these dogs excel in it, because they are so universally great physically. They can do everything. And
they're also crazily intelligent, aren't they? And they are desperate to please their handlers.
Yeah.
So when you combine all that you've just said, the athleticism of these breeds, they are built for function, they're built for purpose, as well as combining that with their intelligence and their almost desperation to please their handlers, you've got a pretty formidable dog on your hands.
Just on that, though, for the listeners, the dog, it has to be moulded into that. It takes a lot of time to end up with that as your final product.
Arguably a full-time job having a breed with such a drive.
It's not arguably. It is. As we've mentioned about the jobs that these dogs do, they need hours and hours and hours of stimulation daily. And if you can't provide that, then unfortunately, I think it's fair to say it's detrimental to the dog's health.
And that's exactly what went wrong with Kobi, wasn't it? Was he had all of these natural instincts and these natural compulsions, but he wasn't able to act on those because he was stuck in a kennel for many, many, many hours a day. Because you can't do anything about it in that rescue situation, because there's so many dogs and not enough people and not enough time in the day. And he wasn't adjusting to kennel life at all well. And he was exhibiting an awful lot of frustrated behaviours, stressed behaviours, anxious behaviours. He was quite clearly, I would go as far as saying, an unhappy dog.
That's no question. Absolutely no question. I think he'd rather be anywhere else than in that situation. He physically started to harm himself ultimately.
Well, he did. Kobi actually chewed his own foreskin off. And I'm sure the gentlemen out there listening to this podcast have probably just curled their toes at the thought. But that is the level of stress that we're talking about. This dog couldn't sit still. He could not stop moving. And Kobi was very, very attractive. He was a stunning example of the breed. He had that sort of really dark amber brindle. I mean, he stood out. And as a result, loads of people would see his picture on the website and think, wow, yeah, I want to meet him. And so they'd come to the rescue, see him, get Kobi out of the kennel. Kangaroo Kobi comes out in full force, crazy, all four paws off the floor. And these adopters would just say, no, turn him around. Not for us. That thing's mental. He was far too much dog, and he was a project, which I don't think your average dog owner was probably able to hack. He was a full-time job.
Absolutely.
And getting his stress under control was not going to be an easy fix.
I think when people look at certain breeds, I think they're doing it through aesthetics. We look at things like the Huskies in the tiny Surrey backyard, and then they wonder why the dog's doing runners and climbing fences. We're looking at breed traits that are not conducive to normal people's day-to-day. Absolutely. A nice little show-line Labrador, fantastic. I look at my dogs, I would be running around in weather like this all day, getting rained on because they need that fulfillment. They need to go out there and exercise. Again, we have to look at what people are actually looking for. Are they looking for aesthetics? Are they looking for a military dog? Are they looking at something that's going to pull a sled all day? Or are they just looking for a nice dog that can chill at home, be with the kids and be with them and, snuggle under the blanket and watch a movie? We've got to understand that for 10 to 15 years, this is our lifestyle.
Unfortunately for Kobi, the vast majority of his life had gone so wrong for him because of irresponsible owners. There's no other reason why Kobi ended up in rescue. He should never, ever have been put in that position. We were very lucky recently to actually meet with a Dutch herder and her owner who had lived the polar opposite experience of what Kobi had, and who had nothing short of an idyllic upbringing for that breed and their needs. So we travelled to West Sussex, where we met with Ross George, who is the co-founder of ProTrack Canine and the Dog House, which is an awesome behaviourist company. And the Dog House do daycare. They offer daycare for any and all breeds, all temperaments. And when we got to this facility, I mean, I think we were both sort of completely blown away, weren't we, by what we were looking at?
Absolutely, yeah.
The ground that it's on is stunningly beautiful, absolutely stunning. And I think most notably, with the daycare side of things, Ross groups all the dogs by temperament as opposed to breed or size. So in one of the paddocks that he had a little border terrier in with several Alsatians, and everyone was just very harmoniously getting along. And there wasn't a single bark, was there? We actually struggled to find it in the first place because I was listening out thinking, right, we're just going to follow the barking. But because there was no barking, we kept turning the wrong way because it was well hidden. So we conducted this interview in the office, and I was sitting across from Ross, and we had the fire running in the background, and Sasha was lying on her bed next to Ross because that was where she was happiest. And she's included in everything that Ross does because, as we said, this breed is a full-time job and they need that companionship. They are known as Velcro dogs, and Sasha was living her most content, happy life. She's very well decorated in working trials. She's won countless awards, and she's now sort of living her happy retirement where she just gets to be a yard dog, and she gets to patrol, and she gets to be with Ross day in, day out, all day. Ross talked to us a little bit about Cairo, who was his first Malinois, who ignited his passion for studying canine behaviour and ultimately was the inspiration behind starting the Dog House, the daycare facility, and also ProTrack Canine, which focuses on the behavioural side of things.
So my name's Ross. I'm currently the head trainer, behaviourist and partner at the Dog House and ProTrack Canine based down here in Felbridge in West Sussex. There's the old adage of, get a job that you love and you'll never work again. And I think that's where I am right now. Going on a decade ago, I got my first Mallee. This was actually the catalyst to the whole thing. That's why it holds such a special place in my heart. We picked him up from a very reputable breeder up north. The guy had bred down a certain lineage. Again, I had researched that lineage. Well, I thought I had. I'd researched as best I could. Anything in writing and anything in black and white is very quickly dispelled once you actually have the living article in front of you. I didn't understand what I was getting with a dog that high drive. When I looked at this dog, it needed more. I couldn't keep him in a crate at home while I went off to work. My wife would pop in, visit the dog, see the dog, let him out for 20 minutes. It's not enough. And I decided that was it. The dog sort of either fits in or it doesn't. With me, I knew there was going to be a 10-year relationship with this dog and a 10-year responsibility with this dog. And I'd made the decision. So there's no point in having the dog pay the price for the decision that I've made. So what we did is we turned it around. I still had a dog that was, for want of a better phrase, a little bit feral. Again, we talk about frustrated behaviors because I wasn't giving the dog what he needed. A high drive dog's not going to cope in a stagnant environment. It's invariably going to start exhibiting that behavior. If it's understimulated, frustrated behavior can become or can be perceived as aggressive behavior. Conflict with the dog. Now we've got a behavioral problem and owner avoidance, and it's all just a train of consequence. And I think we've got to be so mindful of that. I found through one way or another, found a working trials club, which was just down local to us, and I actually began decoying before I did any training. I then moved in and decided this was going to be my way forward. Other than working with the dog, I was able to give him the best life possible by moving into something that we enjoyed. He needed the exercise and the genetic fulfillment, and I needed to keep a roof over my head. And we landed up creating a business out of it. So all of this that we've got around us, everything that's happened, stem back to one dog and making a decision based on that dog rather than myself.
As mentioned earlier about the breed traits of a Dutch herder, Kobi exhibited pretty much all of those traits. It was clear that he was a very smart dog. Similar to Ross when he was speaking about Cairo, he was a little bit feral at times, especially when he first came out, just a big bundle of energy and stress and pent up anxiety almost. You know, as we keep drilling in how stressed this dog was. But when he first came out, you couldn't look at him. You had to hold the lead at arm's length. He was jumping up, he was mouthing you. And this is why other volunteers couldn't work with him. He needed an experienced set of hands to guide him initially, because so mouthy, jumping up, no respect for any personal space. It's not his fault. He has needs. He has these breed traits and these needs, and they were not being fulfilled. So it's not his fault. But regardless of that, he needed more guidance.
Exactly. It was really intense. And that mouthiness is how these breeds in particular communicate a lot. There's a lot of sort of comfort seeking. I know that was something that Kobi did a lot when he was feeling anxious. He just sort of put his teeth around your wrist. There was nothing aggressive about it, but he was just letting you know, I'm here, you're here, we're all good. It was his way of checking in a lot of the time. Once he'd settled past the initial sort of kangaroo Kobi, where it was all four paws off the floor most of the time.
Like trampoline jumping, wasn't he? And then snapping in your face.
It was, you know, to people who didn't know what they were looking at, it was aggressive, very intimidating, out of control and chaotic.
We've had a number of dogs who have been referred on to Battersea. We've taken them, we've worked with them, and thankfully we've put in enough information and enough support for the customers that that dog is now, they stay in situ now, which is what I want to do, is to make sure a dog is able to stay in its own home. I don't want dogs going to rescue. I'm saving a dog from a shelter, and that's the way I see the training. We move all the way to sports and genetic fulfillment. It's exciting stuff. I've got some Malleys and Dutch herders that come in, absolutely love it, and thrive as a result. And you land up with a calmer dog because all those boxes are being ticked. I think a lot of the training will go hand in hand with understanding the breed, with understanding idiosyncrasies, the attachment style between the dog and the owner. It's getting a holistic picture of what's in front of us and dealing with it accordingly. I'm not going to train a beagle the same way I train a Malinois. I'm not going to train a Malinois the same way I train a Labrador. They're all different. They've all got their own personalities, their own drives. In the majority of these cases, it's training the owner. I'm in it for the dog. I'm not in it for the person. I think breed traits are absolutely 110% crucial. I spent 18 months researching my dog before I got him. It was still a baptism of fire. I had no clue what I was in for. You need to understand your lifestyle and what it entails. I think a lot of what's put on social media, it clouds elements of the breed. I think people see a fantastic dog. What they don't see is the months of training that's gone into that.
As we've mentioned, that initial 5 minutes with him was super erratic. Once you've got past that and he's in the field, and we put a lot of time in with him, walking him for hours, essentially on a long line, basic obedience, and super smart. You tell him something once and he'd just get it.
That was the other thing with Kobi as well. As you just said, you told him something once and he'd get it. So if you cocked up and gave him unclear or incorrect direction, he's holding on to that.
But he was a real sweetheart once you got him in the field, and we'd sit down, he'd snuggle right in. Ultimately, in those situations, we were kind of just facilitating what he wanted to do, really. His life was so stressful that was just an opportunity for him to escape that, and we would just facilitate whatever he wanted to do. And he was a real sweetheart.
He'd come back to the kennel a different dog, wouldn't he?
But unfortunately, potential adopters didn't get to see what we saw with him out in the field. They literally saw that initial 5 minutes, he gets turned around straight away. No one wants to have a second look at him.
Ross was talking about how Cairo, his Malinois, was expressing frustrated behaviours because he wasn't meeting his needs. And that's exactly what Kobi was doing. But the thing which we can't stress enough is when you aren't meeting these dogs' needs, those frustrated behaviours could be perceived as dangerous. If you aren't taking ownership and responsibility of your dog's behaviour in a public space, that may be because you aren't meeting your dog's needs correctly, that dog can be seized and destroyed if it is deemed a dangerous dog because of the 1991 Dangerous Dogs Act. And Kobi was a prime example of that. if he'd gone home with an owner who didn't know what they were doing and weren't able to work with him in a healthy, successful way, he could have easily have been one of those dogs who'd been seized because he was a little bit chaotic.
That breed-specific ownership has to start coming to the fore. We saw it with the XL bullies. We saw it with the Huskies and the Malamutes. The Husky is a basic dog. It's bred to run. It's bred to pull sled. They are a simple dog, if not the most simple. It is bred to just expel energy. That is what they do. They're athletes. We're putting these dogs into situations that they're not bred or designed to deal with. The XLs, I think, those became aesthetics. Those became status dogs, where knowledge ends, violence starts. Unfortunately, a lot of people out there with not a lot of knowledge, they tend to then gravitate towards aversives. And now you're fighting with the dog. Now you're in conflict. That's not conducive to a good relationship. Breed-specific legislation is such a blanket approach, and I don't think it works. I think if we had to license dogs or license owners, potentially, I'd happily pay for my dog. I love her. How do you go about countering it? Because there are a lot of nice dogs out there that are being turned nasty because of human intervention, because people want a weapon or status animal. Find a trainer that understands your breed. Find a trainer that knows what idiosyncrasies and things we're looking at, what attachment styles we're looking for, whether it's behavior that's accepted within the breed or whether it's outside of the norm. Find somebody who has that experience with that, because if you don't, you will find somebody who brings in a generalized training method that will not work. And you will be back to square one, if not worse, because all that'll happen is you'll put certain ambiguity in that the dog doesn't understand because you're saving it for a dog that doesn't have drive. We need to find the right type of communication for the right dog, and you need the right person to deliver said communication. Yeah, teaching a dog to sit down, heel, look, it's fairly easy. Handling and harnessing of drives, very different proposition altogether. Now all of a sudden we're in conflict because we're fighting the dog's natural propensity to chase, to bite, to hunt. One of the biggest things about it is giving the owners that confidence to then move forward. You're landing up with a team and an attachment style which is no longer based on neuroticism, it's based on confidence. You're going to land up with a dog that becomes more confident because they look to the owner now to sort out the situation rather than them having to make up their own mind. And that's the big issue.
It was unfortunate with Kobi because he had been ultimately let down by his owner, not being there for him when he needed it. He didn't have the fundamentals of being a polite dog in place. He had no basic training. Even though he was super smart and he cottoned on to things, it was clear that just his general obedience was lacking.
Even if you are a responsible dog owner who owns one of these breeds and, you're doing fabulous things with them, really fun activities like working trials, like, tracking obedience, canicross maybe, it's all well and good having that lovely control and that lovely communication in that environment. But, as Ross said, if you're not habituating that animal to be bomb-proof in every environment, they can become a little bit unpredictable. And Kobi was a prime example of that, where, we worked with him really nicely in the safety of the surrounding fields to the rescue. But being perfectly frank, I'm not sure I would have trusted him if we'd taken him to a supermarket because he hadn't been habituated. And that noisy, busy, potentially triggering environment could have absolutely sent him into a complete tiz. And he would have taken a lot of time and training and trust to mould him into a confident dog who could have managed those situations. And that's really quite difficult to facilitate in a rescue situation because there just isn't the time or the resources to be putting into these high drive breeds. That's why they need to go into homes with really responsible owners who can commit to them 100% and advocate their dog's individual needs at all times. And that's really what Kobi needed, and not being stuck in a kennel.
Between 12 and 18 months prior, do your research, phone your breeders, understand your breed, understand your breeder, understand what they breed for. Do they breed for working? Do they breed for temperament? Do they breed for show? I went to get a Malinois. That's all I wanted. Give me a Mallee. I didn't expect a tirade of questions, trying to understand my living habits, what I did every day, what I was going to do with him in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. They had an idea in their heads because they had bred for the police, they had bred for sports owners, they had bred for high activity households. And here I was coming in going, great, I just want a dog. Why do you want a dog? who's the dog for? What are you going to be doing? Are you going to be exercising with it? Are you going to be competing with the dog? What sports it's going to do? What job does it have? I just want to buy a dog, mate. I don't really care. But that to me is conscientious breeding. That's responsible breeding.
We don't know what happened to Kobi. I wish I could finish this episode by saying he went into a lovely home with a really responsible owner who let him work and do all the things that he wants to do naturally and really gave him the space to manage those big emotions that he was experiencing. But after we moved to Brighton and we obviously left the sanctuary that we were based at, I periodically checked the website because, of course, I did. I've worked with these dogs for months. I've invested in them. And Kobi disappeared off the website. So normally that means that a dog has been adopted and they've gone to their lovely home. So I hope that is the case in this situation because, frankly, I can't bear to think about the alternative because that's how serious poor dog ownership is. You know, dogs are paying for your irresponsibility with their lives. So I hope he's doing a job that he loves. I hope he has an owner who is well versed with such an awesome but intense breed.
Understand your dogs. Understand their genetics and understand how those are fulfilled. We can talk about the 5 freedoms the rest of the year. It's such a small element to that. Understand your animal. Understand what it was bred for. That to me is responsible dog ownership. If you're dealing with that side of it, the rest is going to come naturally anyway. But it's that key element is understand your dogs, their genetics, and how they are fulfilled. That to me is responsible dog ownership.
This is the Canine Justice Chronicles. I'm Ruth Holroyd.
And I'm Peter O'Brien.
Thank you very much to Ross from ProTrack Canine and the team at the Dog House for contributing to this podcast and allowing us to tour their incredible facility. You can find them at www.thedoghouse.sussex.com and www.protrackcanine.co.uk, and that's track without the C. Responsible dog ownership starts with you, because small changes in our mindset leads to big changes in their world. Let's be the owners that our dogs deserve.